Laura had activated the camera and started recording. She began recording the introduction of the report that was scheduled to be broadcast on television the next day. All the network workers had gone home. She was left alone on the set. She had promised everyone that she would close the door as soon as she was done. I watched her from the side of the curtains, hidden, until I saw her start recording. It was my turn. Suddenly, I appeared in front of the camera, hooded, and grabbed her from behind, covering her mouth and throwing her to the ground. Everything had been recorded. I stopped the camera, covered her eyes and mouth, and took her away, holding her tightly with ropes. We entered a basement, and at that moment I untied her and took off the blindfold. Immediately, we melted into a passionate kiss. "Have I hurt you a lot, darling?" I asked her, afraid that I had squeezed her too hard with the ropes. "Don't worry, this way everything will be more believable. We need to make it look like I've been hurt." We laughed and gave each other a hug. All that was left was to wait for everyone to know the news of her disappearance. The next day, the television station where Laura worked published the video she had recorded minutes before her alleged abduction. The channel's most veteran star, journalist Sandra Cruz, had once again captured all the audience's attention with the biggest exclusive of the moment. The best news always went to her, as well as the greatest number of minutes on screen. Although she wasn't the owner, there she behaved like another boss. The audience loved her, and the director and herself knew that. But her moment as a star was very close to being affected. I headed to the basement where Laura was to check on her. I offered her food and water, but she refused to eat anything. She told me that she had to look bad to make it look real, so she decided not to eat anything. I didn't like that. It is true that this way it was easier for everything to be more realistic, but I didn't like that she could get sick by going that far with it. She asked me how the news was going in the media, and I told her that all the channels were talking about it. Her eyes shone in a special way. She was full of joy. The plan was going as we had devised. A day later, the news of Laura's disappearance was going around the world, but a video was beginning to overshadow it. And once again, the protagonist was her, Sandra Cruz, the #1 journalist. In one of the broadcasts where she told the viewers about the progress of her partner's investigation, she appeared visually very affected, unable to contain her tears when she pronounced Laura's name. Without being the victim, her appearance was once again the highlight of the day. All social networks were talking about her emotional video, with words of encouragement towards the sad journalist. Of course, Laura had to know that, and that afternoon I went back to the basement to see her. Her eyes were covered and she had left some ropes squeezing her wrists together. She insisted a lot that we should do it that way, to continue adding evidence of how bad she had been. When I told her about Sandra's video, she got in a very bad mood. She decided it was time to move on to the next part of the plan, and so we did it. I put her in the trunk of the car, and then left her with her hands tied and blindfolded on a secondary road with little traffic. Very few cars passed there. There were no cameras or witnesses. We immersed ourselves in a deep hug, and I left her in that place alone. I had to stay away because they couldn't connect me with her. Half an hour later, a truck passed by that road and found her lost and disoriented. The truck driver approached her and quickly called the police. The kidnapped reporter had appeared, and she was alive. Laura knew very well how she should play her cards. So from her hospital room, she called her boss, the director of the network, and told him that she was safe. As soon as the news broke, all the reporters would wait at the doors of the hospital to have the long-awaited exclusive. That was super news, and whoever had the first images would get the most views. So her boss thanked her for her discretion to give them the scoop, thanking her for her professionalism as a journalist with the company. A few minutes later, Sandra Cruz appeared in her hospital room with Mike, the cameraman. There was a rivalry between them. Laura wasn't happy to see her, and Sandra didn't hide her lack of joy that she had appeared. As soon as Mike counted down to go live, the two of them drastically changed their expressions. Sandra seemed extremely hurt and excited about the reunion with her partner, but at that moment, the camera belonged to Laura. What people wanted was to see her, hear her, know what miseries she had suffered. The two reporters' stellar moments didn't last long, as suddenly the police entered the room and forced all the TV workers to leave. They shouldn't have recorded anything. The police should have been the first to talk to the victim. But they already had it, a super exclusive for the channel. Well, after having told you all this, I think it's time for me to explain who I am and why I did this with Laura. She was my journalism student. I am a professor at the university, and I remembered that she was the most brilliant student who passed through my class. She had a vocation. Above all, what she liked most was being in front of the camera. She loved capturing everyone's attention. I am married, but it is true that my marriage is not going through its best moment. Maybe that was the reason why Laura and I went little by little from a purely professional relationship between teacher and student to a sentimental one. I was wrong, I know. You can judge me for it, but I felt like we had a lot in common. It went beyond a simple attraction. We both shared that ambition to grab the headlines, to be the best in our profession. I loved listening to her speak with such passion about her work, and so we began a secret relationship. After finishing her university studies, she was given a job on regional television as a reporter. She was overjoyed, so many people watching her, paying attention to her reports and interviews. However, she soon fell short, as she couldn't compete with the channel's superstar, Sandra Cruz. I told her not to worry about it. Sandra had been on the air for many years. It was normal that she had the affection of viewers and bosses, but her work was also incredible. They also adored her. But no, for her, that had to change, and that's how she devised a plan, to fake her own kidnapping, and when she was released, all eyes would focus on her. First as a victim, of course, and then as the reporter who, despite the adversities and what she had suffered, continued on the air offering viewers the best news. She was sure that the boss would start giving the exclusives to her. Everyone would want to see her after her misfortune. Well, as I was telling you, the plan had gone as planned. A couple of days after being in the hospital and the exclusive of her appearance, all the media were waiting for her at the main door to record her. She pretended to be overwhelmed by so much attention. I really don't know what to say. Today it is my turn to be your news, dear colleagues. I wish I didn't have to see myself in these circumstances, but if I can take something good from all the terror I have experienced, it is that I've seen many people on the other side of the screen have shown me their love. I feel very lucky to be alive. Afterwards, she walked crying to her car, while hundreds of flashes chased her. The first few days, most of the news was programmed around her testimony, telling what she had suffered, what she had felt, the clues that could lead to the culprit. But soon, Sandra Cruz took care to make the head of the network understand that Laura's news no longer mattered. There was no more information, no suspects. It was the same story over and over again. The director agreed with Sandra because the topic had stalled. They needed freshness, new and attractive news to attract the audience. When Laura saw that everything was returning to normal, she began to get unhinged. She couldn't stand Sandra getting her way. That's why she told me that we had to take one more step. I asked her what she thought, but she just smiled as she caressed my face. It was clear that she already had something on her mind. Then, she asked me to grab my camera and take photos from the street to her window while she undressed and put on her pajamas. She needed those photos, and soon, I would find out why. The next day, she had to record a news story with Mike, one of the cameramen. The two of them had some trust. They had once spent the night together. And although that didn't go further and they never had a relationship, she knew that he was still in love with her. That day, she seemed a little sad and down, and Mike asked her if everything was okay. Laura confessed that she couldn't feel calm and that she was afraid when she was alone. She needed a friend, and Mike offered to spend the afternoon together at his house after work. She accepted. It was just what she wanted. When they arrived, the two began talking about the past, from their adolescence, their boyfriends, their tastes. Mike was very comfortable with her. He liked her, but he didn't want to ruin their friendship. If Laura didn't show that she wanted something more with him, he wouldn't insist. After her tragic experience, what she needed was calm, not radical changes in her life. He offered her a coffee and she accepted. When he placed 2 cups on the table, Laura asked him for some sugar. While he went to the kitchen, she took a bottle from her purse and poured several drops of the liquid into the young man's cup. When Mike returned, he drank his coffee without suspecting anything and soon fell asleep. She had given him a sleeping pill. She took advantage of his deep sleep to carry out her plan. She posted the photos that she had asked me to photograph, with her back naked through the window in one of Mike's drawers. Then she grabbed a knife, made a small cut on her hand, and stained the cuff of the young man's jacket with her blood. When she finished, she grabbed her bag and left the house, leaving the cameraman sleeping soundly until the next day. When Mike woke up, he was disoriented. He didn't remember when Laura had left there and how he had fallen asleep for so many hours on the couch. He didn't have time to shower or have breakfast. It was late. He should have arrived at work half an hour ago. He grabbed his jacket and headed to the network's sets. When he arrived, he saw his boss and Laura talking to the police. He approached to find out what had happened, but at that moment, one of the agents approached him and, putting handcuffs on him, told him that he was detained for the kidnapping of his partner, Laura. Mike couldn't believe what was happening. He yelled at her, assuring her that he hadn't done anything, while the agents dragged him to the exit to take him to the cell. The network director hugged Laura and told her she could go home and take the day off if she needed. But she assured him that all she wanted was to give the world the scoop on who had kidnapped her. She needed to do it, and her boss, of course, didn't object. Once again, she was the center of all the headlines. The young reporter who discovers that her attacker was a coworker. She said that he had taken her to his house and that he insisted a lot that he always wanted to be with her. At first, it seemed normal to her until several clues made her relate that it could be him, since she had received secret notes with handwriting like his. Then, at one point, she found some photos of her without clothes in his room, spying on her through the window from the street. She wasn't even able to take them, so she tried to get out of there and went directly to the police to tell them her suspicions. When the agents arrived, they found the photos, and not only that, also bloodstains on the young man's jacket. By performing laboratory tests, they were able to certify that it was Laura's blood. Everything fell into place, and that young man would go to prison for many years for a crime he had never committed. But for her, the important thing was that she had ousted Sandra on screen. People wanted to know their history. When I discovered everything she had done, I was angry. I didn't want to be complicit in something like that. I had agreed to give her the whim of being the center of attention with a fake kidnapping, but the idea of an innocent person going to jail for that game of lies went against my principles. So I decided to tell her and ask her to solve the mess. As you can imagine, she didn't want to do it. She laughed while telling me that this was perfect because they would never suspect that everything had been pure theater. If there was a culprit, there was always going to be a real victim, and she could continue to make the news. And she could even write books recounting her experience as a survivor of such a traumatic episode. Laura was very happy with how her work career was evolving. Instead of looking hurt and traumatized, she walked through the corridors of the network with an air of grandeur and stardom. And who didn't go unnoticed was her great opponent, Sandra Cruz. The journalists suspected that there was something strange. She didn't trust her, and her way of behaving made her think she was hiding a big secret. So, as a good journalist, she did what she did best: investigate and find that exclusive she needed. She found out the secret relationship that Laura and I had. I didn't know it at the time, but he followed me several times when I went to her house and saw us kissing. There she had the first thread to pull, an unfaithful and secret relationship that no one knew about. Laura knew that the journalist was following her and angrily showed up at her house. Sandra told her that she didn't have to explain herself, she was just doing her job, but Laura wasn't going to stay still. She left that house thinking about what her next step would be. The next day, the police were at Sandra's house. Someone had entered there and left everything destroyed inside. Broken vases, cushions on the floor. Everything seemed to indicate that someone had entered and taken the journalist. Laura had everything she wanted again. Her great rival was out of the game. Since being missing, she would replace her in all the news. She was obsessed and wished that Sarah would never appear again. She told me that if they found her, she herself would make her disappear again, forever. I felt chills at her words because I knew she meant it. Then I threatened her by telling her that I was going to tell everything to the police. She angrily told me that if I did it, she would end me. I answered that no one was going to stop me, and suddenly she took a gun out of her bag, shot me in the heart, and I fell to the ground. She didn't even check my pulse and ran out of there before anyone found my body. Because I knew her so well, I knew she could reach that limit, and I was cautious by putting a bulletproof vest under my sweater. Although I have to say, the bullet didn't go through me, but the impact hurt me quite a bit. I secretly went to the place where Laura was supposed to make a live connection from the street. When she appeared on the air, everything seemed normal, until suddenly Sandra appeared on scene and stood in front of the cameras, revealing and telling all of Laura's secrets, her false kidnapping, the manipulated evidence. She, motionless, didn't know what to do. The camera was recording her. Everyone from their homes was listening to Sandra's confession, who was forced to simulate her own kidnapping in order to catch her. Laura looked everywhere. She didn't know how to get out of there. They had caught her, and suddenly, her eyes met mine. Behind the cameraman were me, Mike, and the police. We had an agreement, and I had told them the whole truth. Laura had lost.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.